I would like to thank my colleague from Belgium for having stood in for me for a while. Let's now continue our work, and we go now to item 10, report of the evaluation body on its work in 2015. I'm sure this item will retain our attention for some time. Before starting, I invite the chairperson of the evaluation body, Mr. Ahmed County, and its rapporteur, Ms. Naila Seribashit, to join us at the podium. I wish to remind you that the evaluation body was established by the committee at its 9th session in Paris, and the objective was to evaluate the nominations to the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. Secondly, the nominations to the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And thirdly, the proposals to the register of best safeguarding practices. And lastly, the requests for international assistance greater than $25,000 US. It should be noted that for this cycle, unfortunately, no proposal for the register of best safeguarding practices was submitted. Let me explain how we will deal with items of the agenda concerning the report of the evaluation body that also includes 3 sub-items. We will begin with item 10, the overall report of the evaluation body on its work. Firstly, Mrs. Seribasic will present an oral report on a number of transversal and specific issues raised during the body's work on the 3 mechanisms, namely the urgent safeguarding list, the representative list, and international assistance. I will then open the floor for general debate on this item. Then we will suspend item 10. We will not adopt the overall decision 10COM10 until we have evaluated all individual files for the 3 mechanisms. We will then move to the evaluation of the 6 nominations to the urgent safeguarding list, that is item 10A, the 34 nominations to the representative list, that is item 10B, and the 2 international assistance requests, item 10C. On these nominations and requests for financial assistance, the chair of the evaluation body will present to the committee a brief presentation with the display of the photographic material on the screens, plus the reasons for its draft decisions. Concerning the debate of the committee on the files, due to tight schedule and in order to allow sufficient time for the committee to discuss on specific files, the Bureau, during its meeting on 6 October, debated how to deal in particular with the many nominations that will be presented for examinations. As you know, with 42 nominations to be examined over the course of 9 hours, only approximately 12 minutes per file could be allocated, which is obviously insufficient. We therefore explored ways to better manage the limited time available and concluded that we would invite committee members wishing to discuss or amend specific draft decisions on nominations to inform the Secretariat by today, 9 a.m. I also reminded you regarding this new procedure yesterday during our discussion on item 2, adoption of the agenda. Therefore, in principle, we would adopt paragraph by paragraph those draft decisions, while we could expect to adopt the rest of the decisions as whole. In either case, the submitting state will have 2 minutes for comments after the adoption of the decision as customarily. The Secretariat received 6 requests for debate.
A little bit more now.
I understand the Secretariat has now received more requests, I think 8 for debate by committee members. I will therefore conduct the debate on these files, these 8 files, accordingly, and I hope in this way we can save a bit of time. Another aspect that I want to clarify is how I intend to proceed with amendments to the draft decisions on nominations. I must say that I will follow in this regard the previous practice by my predecessors. I think we all agree that the spirit of consensus is the one that should prevail in our debates. I think also it is worth reminding that the evaluation body was created by us, the committee, to assist us in our work on nominations, because we know we have no time to go thoroughly in each nomination. We chose the members of the body on the basis of our own proposals of candidates, and with this in mind, we should trust its work, which has been long and collegial. We, however, are entitled to have a different opinion in some cases. So, when an amendment is proposed, I would like to be able to conclude that it meets the broad agreement of the members of the committee. I will then ask you, in this case, to show your support to the proposed amendment, and I will judge if it meets this broad agreement. As it is not about a formal vote, but a demonstration of broad agreement and consensus, we cannot proceed as for a vote, counting those present and voting, those voting for, against, and those abstaining. That is what is happening when a formal vote is taking place. But for a consensual decision to be taken to change the draft decision by the evaluation body, to which we asked to give us their advice, I will seek for a broad agreement that is more than a half of the committee members. Should you wish a formal vote, you will then have to notify the chair, and we will strictly apply the procedure laid down in our rules of procedure. Do you have any comments or questions on the procedures proposed for the examinations of the files? I see no request for the floor. Let's proceed. Dear colleagues, I wish now to recall several other important points about the procedure of your debates, which are the working methods adopted by the committee that I kindly ask you to respect. During the general debates, priority is given to members of the committee, but I will also give the floor to the states parties, non-members of the committee, and other observers if time permits. During the debates on draft decisions concerning specific nominations, proposals, and requests, participation in the debates is limited to committee members. Let me also recall Rule 22.4 of the Rules of Procedure. Submitting states whether or not a member of the committee shall not speak to advocate the inclusion of their file, but only to provide information in reply to questions raised, if any. Moreover, since its sixth session in Bali in 2011, the committee has established a working method that is not to accept new information or additional evidence that the submitting state would like to present after the assessment of the file by the evaluation body, and in particular during the committee meeting. Only clarification concerning the information already included in the file evaluated by the evaluation body are possible. This is to ensure fair treatment between files and submitting states. Indeed, some have already withdrawn their files, while after reading the recommendations of the evaluation body in order to review and complete their files for a next cycle. I remind members and observers that there are large numbers of people following our work back home through the webcast or through the news media, and it is therefore important for us to keep as closely as possible to our schedule. Do you at this stage have any question or comment on the procedure for the debates or the documents? I see no request for the floor. Allow me now at this stage to give the floor to Mrs. Seri Basic to present their report. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairperson. It is my pleasure to introduce the overall report of the evaluation body on its work in 2015 to the committee. Let me to start with general information regarding our working methods and the files treated in the 2015 cycle. The body was composed of 12 members whose names you will find in document 10, paragraph 2. 6 of them were individual expert representatives of state parties, non-members of the committee, and another 6 persons represented accredited non-governmental organizations. When we met for the first time in March this year, we elected Mr. Ahmed Skounti from Morocco as a chairperson and Mrs. Emily Drani Adrani from the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda as vice chairperson. My colleagues then honored me, a representative of the International Council for Traditional Music, with the duties of rapporteur. As was the case in the previous cycles, the Secretariat assessed the technical completeness of the submissions without entering into the substance of the files. However, when treating the two international assistance requests, the Secretariat gave more substantial feedback to assist the submitting states. Altogether, 50 files were processed by the Secretariat, and 45 were transmitted to the evaluation body, including 8 for the urgent safeguarding list, 35 for the representative list, and 2 for international assistance. Among them, 6 concern resubmitted or previously referred files, and 1 relates to an element submitted previously for another mechanism. For this cycle, as was already emphasized by Mrs. Chairperson, no proposal to the Register of Best Safeguarding Practices was considered by the evaluation body. Before meeting for the second time in June this year, all members of the body submitted through the dedicated website their individual assessments and recommendations on each file. Then, during the June meeting, we collectively debated recommendations on each criterion of all submissions, decided thus whether or not to recommend inscriptions on the two lists or granting the international assistance, and also we broadly discussed general and transversal themes and issues. On that basis, following the meeting, I elaborated draft decisions for each file, as well as general observation and recommendations from the body. Then, in September, we met again to discuss, amend, validate, and adapt these drafts, the final outcome of which are 4 documents that are in front of you. Report on our work, examination of nominations for inscription on the two lists, and examination of requests for international assistance. These 4 final documents represent the unanimous consensus of the evaluation body members. Mrs. Chairperson, let me now to outline briefly our working methods and principles for evaluation. It is important to emphasize once again, in line with the approach of the previous bodies, that we based our recommendations exclusively on the analysis of the adequacy of information, meaning argumentation and demonstration instead of mere assertion, presented within the nomination files and requests, and not on the element as such, its merits or those of the intentions of the proposed project. Any possible prior knowledge or information that individual evaluators may have possessed about the element or project was not taken into account. Also, in order to secure evaluators' neutrality, a member of the body did not participate in evaluation of a nomination submitted by his or her country or the country of domiciliation of his or her non-governmental organization. There were 4 such cases. Throughout our work, we referred frequently to the aide-memoire for completing nominations to the representative list and the corresponding aide-memoire for the urgent safeguarding list, which proved to be important tools for the members of the body. We paid particular attention to keep consistency of evaluation within and across files, as well as consistency with previous decision of the committee. In the case of certain resubmitted files, this was not easy to attain given the fact that intangible cultural heritage is constantly evolving and that the committee's jurisprudence is also evolving. Along the same reasoning, we asked for consistency within multinational nominations, considering that they should be evaluated as one and the same whole, in particular given the fact that multinational nominations pertain to the core of international cooperation and dialogue between cultures and communities. In order to help submitting states, the evaluation body included in its draft decision specific feedback and concerns, which are often provided with more details and are thus more extensive in comparison to the practice of previous bodies, in particular in the case of files recommended for referral, but also files recommended for inscription. Each draft decision thus constitutes a carefully composed whole. We hope that such an approach may function as an additional encouragement to state parties to take into account all remarks provided by the committee and address them in their periodic reports later on. In regard to the international assistance mechanism, the evaluation body yet again faced requests lacking essential information. Given the importance of this mechanism for achieving the objectives of the Convention, we considered different ways to obtain additional information and corrections in a relatively short time frame, including substantial assistance by the Secretariat or by an expert, and the delegation by the committee of its decision-making authority to the Bureau. Concrete recommendations are included in the respective draft decision. Moving on to the characteristics of the element nominated for the urgent safeguarding list and the representative list, let me, Mr. Chairperson, to emphasize that the body was impressed with the rich diversity of intangible cultural heritage expressions and practices belonging to various domains and sometimes to multiple domains of intangible cultural heritage, as well as with those that demonstrate a close connection between intangible and tangible heritage, the dynamic nature of intangible cultural heritage in urban and rural contexts, and the relationship between humans and their natural environment. Many nominations illustrate the contribution of the safeguarding to sustainable development, notably in terms of conflict resolution, peace building, environmental sustainability, gender equality, or enhancement of local economies. Yet other nominations brought to the fore the relationship between intangible cultural heritage and organized sports, the interaction between humans and animals, and other complex subjects. Concurrently, the submitted files demonstrate a great variety of communities and groups that are involved in the transmission and enactment as bearers, practitioners, knowers, stakeholders, and audiences, including indigenous and minority peoples, women, youth, children, and otherwise neglected or disempowered groups and communities. The members of the evaluation body were also pleased to note that a reasonable geographical balance has been maintained, with each electoral group being represented by one or two files to the urgent safeguarding list and 3 or more to the representative list. It was also good to see an upsurge of multinational nominations to the representative list, displaying state parties' will to foster dialogue and international cooperation. In addition, 2 multinational nominations may, according to our assessment, serve as models concerning all inscription criteria, together with 3 national nominations, while several additional nominations can serve as good examples concerning various components of their elaboration, including 1 or more criteria, appended community consent, or accompanying video. On the other side, the evaluation body could only reiterate concern expressed by the previous bodies in reference to the fact that by far the highest importance on the part of submitting states is given to the representative list, while the three other mechanisms are underused. Besides a need to devise new ways to promote and reposition the urgent safeguarding list, as well as to continuously deliberate how to identify and disseminate best practices and how to develop alternate, lighter ways of their sharing, we hope that technical assistance and other support provided by the Secretariat to state parties wishing to request international assistance will improve the situation. As well, if I may add, the new possibilities that you discussed today under the item 8. In terms of the presentation of files, the evaluation body regrets to have to mention that the quality of submissions is still variable and that many of the deficiencies identified in previous cycles are recurrent. Therefore, we included in the draft decision 10COM10 an encouragement to state parties to take full advantage of the information and advice available in the aide-memoirs for the two lists and the new aide-memoir for international assistance, which was recently prepared by the Secretariat. Mrs. Chairperson, let me turn now to cross-cutting and global themes and issues that arose during the process of evaluation and their connection to specific criteria of the mechanisms under evaluation during this cycle. Thanks to evaluations of all mechanisms by a single body instead of the previous two bodies, one of the advantages was that the commonalities and specificities of the Convention's different mechanisms and each of their criteria more clearly came to the fore. This was particularly true of the relationship between the urgent safeguarding list and the representative list. Their different purposes are reflected in criteria U2 and U3 and R2 respectively. As for the responses to criterion R2, which is at the heart of the representative list, it appeared that they are often inward-looking, focused on the benefits of inscription for the element itself, in parallel with a trend to provide assertion instead of demonstration. Thus, the body proposed a clarification, which is also reflected in the draft decision 10COM10, that the response to criterion R2 may refer to, moreover, that it is reasonable to refer to information which is explained in greater detail in other sections of the multinational file, while addressing at the same time primarily those possible consequences of inscription that relate to the overall purpose of the list. In other words, for an adequate response to the criterion R2, the submitting state needs to clearly elucidate how the element incorporates, implies, and/or speaks in favor of contributions relevant to the overall purposes of the representative list, namely, how it contributes to visibility of ICH in general and raises awareness of its importance. As regards the urgent safeguarding list, due to its different purpose, it is of crucial importance to devise a well-elaborated safeguarding plan which adequately responds to specific, clearly identified threats that are possible to mitigate or overcome, in contrast to general issues such as migration or modernization that are inherent to the transformation of a society. The adequacy of responses was debatable in some nominations, similarly as in the previous cycles. The body also encountered difficulty when faced with safeguarding plans which were already in the phase of implementation at the time of the evaluation. While this is commendable for the state party not to delay the safeguarding of the element regardless of the schedule of its inscription, it also presented an issue for the body concerning a lack of actual plans after inscription. Thus, we suggested the committee to clarify that the safeguarding plans and measures are nevertheless supposed to include a certain period of time following the inscription. The adequate definition of a community continues to be one of the major themes and discussions of the evaluation body, given that the participation of communities, groups, or individuals is a common criterion for all three mechanisms that we were asked to evaluate. When the communities are not well defined, then it is not surprising that their widest possible participation is not easily demonstrated. Defining the communities in terms of internal composition and contours is also important, as it is a prerequisite for satisfying other related criteria for all three mechanisms. Within this broad topic, several aspects and issues were vividly present and discussed in this cycle, namely the consistency in the definition of community throughout the nomination file, the agency of the community concerned, for instance, as regards the issue of de- and recontextualization, regarding the historical perspective, and regarding the relationship between the enactment of an element and tangible objects associated with it. Then we also extensively discussed the importance of delineating contours of the involved community and its internal dynamic. Then the rationale for selecting only one part of the community concerned, or conversely, for involving communities across the whole nation or population of a submitting state. Then also the bottom-up versus top-down approaches to safeguarding. And finally, we also broadly discussed the issue of the contents, that is, of the subject of the free, prior, and in particular informed consent to the nomination of the element as formulated in the file, both in the cases of national and multinational nominations. 4 paragraphs in the draft decision 10COM10 relate to those aspects of community involvement for which the body brought forward some new emphasis or suggestions. 2 in relation to multinational submissions, 1 addressing the subject of consent, demonstrating community participation, and 1 referring to an adequate and consistent description of the scope and contours of communities, groups, or, if applicable, individuals concerned. In our report, we also suggested to state parties to be particularly attentive to acknowledging sensitivities of all communities within their territory when elaborating nominations that are distinctly national in their outlook. This last point was one instance of a suggestion explicitly intended to encourage dialogue among communities. Another one relates to a significant number of nominations in this cycle that involve oral traditions, in part or in whole. In the respective draft decisions, we therefore included an invitation to state parties to ensure translation of lyrics in appended video, and also while promoting the element in general on the international scale in order to foster dialogue and mutual respect beyond national and language boundaries. The third such aspect pertains to the practices of using animals in traditional games, with one such example in this cycle, which might be acceptable at the local or national level, but might generate misunderstanding when proposed for recognition at the international level. In this regard, we relied on the decision 9COM10 and the position of the previous subsidiary body. Mrs. Chairperson, let me to continue with the issue of inappropriate vocabulary and expressions not favorable to dialogue. which the evaluation body once again frequently encountered in this cycle. In order to understand their continuous usage despite repeated reminders to avoid them, we paid particular attention to specific nuances of their usage and implied meanings, focusing in particular on the term authenticity. It appears that its assessment in terms of inappropriate vocabulary in some cases actually underestimates the seriousness of the problem. Namely, often it is not only a question of wording, but of mindset, implying negation of some basic principles of the convention, such as a static conception of the element versus its constant recreation, primacy given to past forms, functions, and meanings versus living heritage of today, or disempowerment of communities through top-down design of safeguarding measures versus agency of the communities concerned. In such cases, we were of the opinion that submitting states need to be more explicitly reminded to stick to the ideas, principles, and objectives of the Convention, and therefore we addressed such misconceptions in respective draft decisions. On the other hand, in a few cases, the term authenticity pertained to the community's own sense of identity and continuity, and as such seemed to the body to be less inappropriate. All in all, the evaluation body may suggest to the committee and future evaluation bodies to continue reflecting on the issue of inappropriate vocabulary, paying particular attention to who employs such terms, how, in what context, and with which implications. Similarly, as regards several nominations that provoke discussion among members of the body on the involvement of children in the enactment of intangible cultural heritage, we could not offer a more general recommendation beyond those applied to individuals' files, along with an invitation to the committee and future bodies to continue reflecting on the role of children in elements with added economic value or elements that incorporate hazards, as in the case of some craftsmanship and some performing arts. Towards the end of my report, Mrs. Chairperson, let me to address briefly inventorying. That is the criterion U5 and R5, which received a significant attention from the evaluation body in this cycle, in particular thanks to the newly introduced provision requiring a submitting state party to provide a relevant extract of the inventory or inventories. On the basis of insights gained through the comparison of relevant extracts of inventories with nomination files and with existing observations and recommendations from the two aide-memoirs, we were in the position to suggest developing a clear and coherent minimum standard for demonstrating the inclusion of an element in an inventory, which, if approved, can be implemented starting from the next cycle. This pertains first to the necessity for a correspondence between the information provided in the inventory and the nomination file. Second, to the format of the inventory, which needs to incorporate at least the name of the communities, groups, or, if applicable, individuals concerned, their geographic location, and the range of the element. Third, to the acceptability of inventories on levels other than national. Fourth, to the requirements laid out in Article 12 of the Convention with regard to regular updating, indicating the periodicity and modality of updating, understood not only as adding new elements, but also as revising existing information on the evolving nature of the elements already included in the inventory. Fifth, to the requirements laid out in Article 11 of the Convention with regard to the participation of communities, groups, and relevant non-governmental organizations in the elaboration and updating of the inventory, and sixth, to the information on the name of the inventory concerned and the entity responsible for maintaining and updating it, the date of inclusion of the element in the inventory, and its reference. This six-part proposal of a minimum standard for demonstrating the inclusion of an element in an inventory makes an important part of the draft decision 10COM10. For this cycle, however, as we emphasized in the report, since this was the first cycle of implementation of new provision regarding the relevant extract of the inventory, the evaluation body decided to follow customary practice of previous bodies, which was rather inclusive and flexible in terms of requested levels of demonstrations. So I have reached, Mrs. Chairperson, to the end of my report. Hoping that I have given an accurate and comprehensive overview of our work, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to the chairperson of the evaluation body and to each and every member of the body for their support towards me in the capacity of a rapporteur. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and members of the committee, for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ms. Seri Basic. You have raised many issues which should inform the debate of the committee. I'm sure the committee has so many comments, questions, but remember to keep your interventions short. We have now about 20 minutes before lunch. Let's now start the debate on this very important agenda item, and we will now open the list of speakers. Let's start our debate with Latvia. Latvia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Latvia would like to express appreciation of the diversity of nominations being evaluated this year, and also its satisfaction of the fact that among the nominations submitted, the evaluation body has proposed several nominations as model nominations, and it is encouraging that some of these are multinational. Latvia would also like to make some general observations concerning the experience of the evaluation body. It has been first cycle since the evaluation body has undertook its responsibilities, and we definitely present our thankfulness for all the efforts that have been carried out for arrive to decisions taken by the committee. Although it was established on experimental basis, we believe that this has proved to be fruitful. Having a single body of evaluation allowed to compare the interpretation and application of criteria in case of various mechanisms established, including both international lists. We also congratulate the evaluation body for reaching consensus on all the nominations and for making efforts to maintaining the consistency of the committee's decisions that we believe was a difficult task in particular cases, especially concerning the nominations resubmitted, while the interpretation of certain criteria has developed over the last years. We also think that enlargement of referral decision in cases of nominations where technical as well as substantial information details are missing is to be continued. Secondly, as for the draft decisions proposed and criteria applied, we are convinced that the evaluation body was committed to have duly attentive and well-thought decisions on each of the criteria. We also have a feeling that certain draft decisions are probably slightly overly critical, for instance, as for the interpretation of safeguarding measures proposed in different nominations, so namely criteria 3 in both lists. We also would like to highlight in particular the due attention paid to the question of inventories, proposing a detailed elaboration on the interpretation of Criteria 5 within the report of the evaluation body. Meanwhile, this also witnesses that certain clarity might be still missing, for instance, on the interpretation of term relevant extract concerning the annexes to be provided. Thus, we definitely support the proposal to prepare a guideline on inventories for the states parties that should be helpful indeed for the upcoming nominations. We would like to thank once again all the members of the evaluation body for their work carried out and the Secretariat for assisting in the complex task of evaluation. Acknowledging the extensive evaluation work carried out by the evaluation body, Latvia would like to state that we intend to support the draft decisions proposed, except certain aspects that we would like to raise, namely concerning the nominations proposed for the urgent safeguarding list that we consider of particular importance, referring to the endangered viability of these elements. Thank you.
Thank you, Latvia. I now give the floor to Belgium.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chairperson. Belgium would like to congratulate the evaluation body for an excellent job done. They have made a thorough, systematic and consistent analysis, and we really congratulate both the accredited NGOs and the experts that have worked on this. I think it's a proof that the new system works, and we hope it will continue. We share the regret that there was no proposal for the Register of Best Safeguarding Practices, Article 18, and we hope that other proposals will be submitted in the future. We noted with care the point made on page 5.19 about the working methods, and especially the principle that the recommendation and the decision should only be based on information in the file, and that it's not a assessment of the merits of the element or project itself. And also the idea that no additional information can be taken into account except what is available on the relevant web page of UNESCO. On page 6.22, there were a number of remarks made about the consistency of evaluation within and across files, and reference was made to the inventory extract. And the principle that was proposed there was that if there is information that contradicts the information provided in the nomination file, that it could not be ignored. But according to us, it works both ways, and that the extract can not only be used against a file, but also in favor of a file. So we beg to disagree with the point made on page 17, number 65, where the body is of the opinion that the committee cannot take into account information from the inventory or inventory extract. We do think that this information is available and that it could be used. And it could be an incentive to produce rich and dynamic inventories that contain a lot of information. Furthermore, on page 9, point 34, there's a reference about the consistency in the definition of community. There's a point that Belgium always makes, that it's about communities, groups, and where appropriate individuals. We understand the suggestion as far as it is within the context of a nomination file, but we would plead against a full and clear definition of the concept of community for the convention as a whole. We have to keep the definition as open as possible, and to also allow for other interpretation of the notion of community, except for local, closed and homogeneous communities. So, and it was also mentioned in point 35 that we should try not to go for a monolithic conception of community. We absolutely agree with this, and we would like, for instance, to refer to the notion of heritage community as it is presented in the Convention of the Council of Europe on the value of cultural heritage for society, where this notion is very broad and also conceptualized as a network. So we should keep all options open. In point 38, reference was made to economic and social challenges, and we understand that the evaluation body noticed the strategy to avoid discussing tourism, and I think it is a point that should be addressed. State parties should not avoid the word tourism and touristic dimensions in the safeguarding plan, and that it should be addressed related to sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belgium. The next on the list is the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Republic of Korea, first of all, would like to convey our heartfelt appreciation for the tremendous job done by the evaluation body. The efforts of the criteria to support the function of this new body should be applauded as well. We believe the new body has successfully kept the consistency with the previous bodies, in particular concerning standards and principles of the evaluation. And also they have well elaborated their recommendations based on the expertise in various fields of intangible cultural heritage. Moreover, we were much impressed with the substantial explanation and a concrete recommendation from the evaluation body, which will facilitate the relevant state parties to accommodate them efficiently. As our Latvian colleagues mentioned concerning the application of criteria, such inventorying, we believe that the evaluation body can develop its way forward to create more concrete and detailed criteria, and to help state parties to prepare their nomination well. Thank you.
Thank you, the Republic of Korea. I now give the floor to Turkey.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. La délégation turque souhaite tout d'abord féliciter l'organe d'évaluation pour sa tâche exemplaire. L'organe d'évaluation a été créé par le comité au cours de la 9e session qui était composée de 12 personnes. 6 personnes en provenance des États parties de la Convention qui ne sont pas membres du comité et les 6 autres experts en provenance des organes non gouvernementaux accrédités. Grâce à cela, la capacité et la compétence de l'organe d'évaluation a pu devenir plus indépendant, cohérent et objectif. C'est la première fois que le comité a eu l'opportunité d'examiner les dossiers soumis par les listes et pour l'assistance internationale d'un montant de plus de $25,000 par le biais du rapport de l'organe unique. Nous avons lu attentivement les rapports de l'organe d'évaluation et nous avons remarqué que la création de cet organe était en effet une bonne idée d'examiner tous les dossiers soumis par un organe d'évaluation. Madame la Présidente, nous sommes d'accord dans la manière générale du rapport de l'organe d'évaluation, même s'il y a quelques différents aspects qui nécessiteront de modifications mineures. Et la délégation turque est consciente que l'évaluation de tous les dossiers est une tâche très difficile et délicate. Nous avons eu l'expérience au cours de l'examen des dossiers soumis pour la liste représentative qui a été examiné par l'organe subsidiaire dont la Turquie était membre. Pour cela, nous comprenons les difficultés rencontrées dans l'évaluation des dossiers de candidature et nous tenons féliciter une fois de plus l'organe d'évaluation pour leur travail vital pour la Convention. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Turkey. I'll now give the floor to Kyrgyzstan to be followed by Tunisia.
Thank you, Chair Madam. Kyrgyzstan also would like to express our gratitude to all the members of the evaluation body for their thorough analytical work. We have a question related to the point mentioned in the report. It is the point about the usage of animals in traditional practices. Everybody probably remember how hot and sensible discussions we had a year ago in terms of this point. And my question is, it was mentioned that the recognition of animals at national and international level could be, acceptable, and inscription of this practice into different lists of UNESCO could cause a different understanding or comprehension. Could you please provide more detailed explanation on this point? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Tunisia.
Tout d'abord, je remercie l'organe d'évaluation pour la qualité de ce rapport qui a dépassé la simple description pour soulever quelques problématiques d'ordre méthodologique et même théorique à lesquelles on se trouve parfois confronté. Et à ce propos, je me demande dans quelle mesure l'absence d'une définition précise de la communauté a influencé sur l'évaluation générale de quelques éléments qui ont fait objet de candidature. Merci.
Thank you, Tunisia. I now give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brazil would like to express its appreciation for the work done by the body on its first evaluation. Concerning inventories, we are aware that each country has its own methods for doing them. Therefore, we believe that recommendations regarding inventories should be more in general lines. We do not believe, for that matter, that there should be a unique guide for its elaboration. We regret that during this cycle we won't have the opportunity to analyze a nomination for the Register of Best Safeguarding Practices, to which Brazil attaches great importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brazil. I've now come to the end of the list of speakers from the members of the committee. I will now request the observers, if any has a comment or a question, please to indicate so.
NGO tradition for tomorrow, an NGO, accredited NGO tradition for tomorrow.
Is that the one that
He wanted the floor.
I see that an NGO Traditions for Tomorrow would like to take the floor. Can you please take the floor?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais tout d'abord féliciter le travail de l'organe d'évaluation et contribuer à constater les progrès pour notre convention que son analyse a pu faire de ces candidatures. Néanmoins, comme certains États l'ont exprimé, comme ONG, nous regrettons qu'il n'y ait pas eu de proposition pour le registre des bonnes pratiques. Les éléments sur les listes sauvegarde urgente, sur la liste représentative, sont des nominations, certes, de l'humanité. Elles sont néanmoins locales par nature, puisqu'elles concernent les communautés essentiellement les groupes, le cas échéant, les individus. Les bonnes pratiques de l'article 18 sont des exemples pour l'ensemble des États partis à la Convention. Elles sont des exemples pour les communautés qui sont les porteurs du patrimoine immatériel. Elles sont aussi le reflet du travail des ONG qui sont souvent au cœur de ces bonnes pratiques et qui, par ces moyens, accompagnent la sauvegarde du patrimoine immatériel. Nous espérons, nous formons des vœux pour que dans les prochaines sessions de votre comité, il puisse y avoir à nouveau des propositions pour des inscriptions sur le registre des bonnes pratiques. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. I do not see any other observer requesting the floor. In that case, I will now turn to the rapporteur to address some of the issues raised by Belgium on inventories. The same question was asked by Brazil, and then the definition of the notion of community, the same issue raised by Turkey, and there was also an issue raised by Brazil on tourism, and then Kyrgyzstan wanted to know about the use of animals in the nominations. You have the floor, Madam.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Chairperson. So as for inventorying, it was addressed with several of speakers. So it was the first time that we had opportunity to make a comparison with what is written within the nomination file and these extracts, these files which are taken from national inventories or inventories on a national level. And also, we, as I said, relied strongly on the aide-memoirs. And so, you know, when comparing, when putting into comparison all these informations, all these free basic sources, we were very much unsure and confused how to proceed. Because from one side, one of the very clear stipulation for the convention is that each state party is supposed to develop inventory which is in line with its specific situation. So, I mean, as for format, as for what kind of contents are expected to be included, it is all up to the state parties. And we all, of course, I mean, respect that. But then on the other side, you don't know how to behave, like how to approach things when you have very, very limited amount of information, even when you have only a name of the elements. Is it inventory, especially as it is also very clearly stated in the convention that the whole idea of inventory is to help the safeguarding of the element. So how a simple name of the element could in itself help the safeguarding. So, and then in order to be consistent and to compare files within particular files and among files, actually it developed through our discussions. We first thought that this is going to be, that we are going only to present to you how we dealt with these conflicting information. Then it actually, through our free meetings, it appeared that we can propose a kind of very basic standard requirements which do not go much further than what is already written in, which is already decided by you and what is included in the form. It is more the issue that it is a bit of more clarification regarding what is already in the form. This is as for inventorying. As for communities, the definition of communities that was raised by Belgium and also by Tunisia, I mean, these are two different things. Of course, for a very good reason, convention does not define what is community. And the this is absolutely the consensus of the members of the evaluation body, that we absolutely, we completely accept and respect and follow that, that understanding. On the other side, faced with concrete files, if community is not well defined, then you are again in trouble as an evaluator. If you have in one section a certain community, which seems to be in the very center, as we already know, communities are in the very center of the whole convention. So if in one section you have a description of one community, and then in another section it is another one community, and then it is named in one way in one section and differently in another section, of course you are confused. And so, yeah, this is our, again, here we only follow your decisions. Communities should be consistently defined within one, of course, within one nomination file. It doesn't mean that we need a global definition of what community means. Oh my God, no, quite the contrary. Okay, so then, what was else? Yeah, the use of animals. So we, in that we completely followed the recommendation of the previous body from the last cycle and the decision of the committee. So our position was that we didn't go into prejudging which practices might be acceptable and which might not be. But we were only, we were aware of the fact that when proposing an element for international inscription, then the state party should be aware of the fact that this is then an international sphere with different sensitivities, and taking into account that fact, and therefore addressing these possible controversial elements, controversial issues within the nomination file, to provide more clear explanation of what is, what kind of usage of animals is characteristics for the element in question. I hope this satisfies your question. What else was? That's it? Yeah. As for... Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Rapporteur, for those responses to the questions raised. I see that Ethiopia would like to take the floor. Please be brief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because, our plank is in the far right, it was in your offside. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. As this is my first time taking the floor, I would like to congratulate the State Party of Namibia for the excellent organization of this committee session and the warm welcome accorded to our delegation. And I also would like to extend my appreciation, Madam Chair, Secretariat, your diligent guidance of this meeting. What I earlier wished to pose for the evaluation body was, I first would like to echo my previous colleagues and speakers to express my appreciation for the strong effort made to bring us all these drafts. It truly shows, compared to what we used to have in the old times, it truly shows how the work is improving every year. But the question I would like to pose is, I wish to request the evaluation body to explain how much effort you've made to better understand the local contexts of the respective elements, as I have observation on the recommendations of modifications, even on the names of elements, though it is in principle supposed to be the issue of the state parties. Even on modification, recommendations on modifications of names, I have observed in some of the evaluations you have made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. Madam Rapporteur, would you like to respond to Ethiopia?
Thank you. As for taking into account local context, I mean, of course, the whole convention is about nurturing diversity of heritage worldwide. So, but again, our very basic principles is to look and to analyze the information provided. So the more local context is described and explained and demonstrated, the easier for us. That's the very basic principle. So yeah, but basing on the explanation of what is the local context and what is the social function, cultural meanings of the element within the culture, within the local context. As for the issue of names, it was actually the part that Secretariat was requested by the committee to solve possible issues around names of the element. As for the evaluation body, we have one paragraph relating to a kind of encouragement, suggestion to state parties, but this is not a part of the draft decision. So the suggestion from one side, we very much appreciate the usage of local elements. We think this is good and important, and also it appeared through community consents that many communities actually appreciate, are in favor to keep the local name of the element, but then also to have a short kind of description of the name, meaning placing it in a certain domain so that it can communicate on the international scale. That's for us, and in terms of, changes of the names of the element in order not to provoke misunderstanding again on the international scale, it was a part that Secretariat did.
Thank you very much. And I would really want to thank all of you for this interesting and fruitful debate. Once again, let me remind you that we will examine the draft decision 10COM10 after having examined the individual decisions under items 10A, 10B, and 10C. We are doing extremely well with our time, and I really wish to congratulate you, and I hope we'll keep it this way. Before we break for lunch, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary of the Convention for a few practical announcements. Madam Secretary.
Thank you. I recall a number of activities that are taking place during the lunch break and later in the day. NGOs are meeting in room Oryx 4 from 1:30 to 2:30. An information session on the Convention's global capacity building strategy will be held for electoral group 5A and 5B between 1:30 and 2:30 in room Oryx 5. There is, as I told you yesterday, the Namibian exhibition where you can see many cultural goods in the white tent on the tennis court open to participants every day from 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. I recall the cocktail reception offered by the Turkish National Commission for UNESCO and the Turkish Embassy in Windhoek that will be hosted in the food court at 6 p.m. I make my nearly last plea to those that have not registered to do so. And then my last important point before the lunch break is that lunch can be purchased at the food court. It's not offered. We have witnessed a great generosity from our Namibian host, but for the lunch, please, if you are resident in the hotel, sign your bill charging your room, and if you are not residing in this hotel, please pay your dues as appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We are now going to break for lunch, and this afternoon will start at 2:30 p.m. to start with the nominations. Please be here on time not to miss out on anything. Thank you and bon appetit.
Groove you, baby. You're gonna want me back, 'cause I'm the finest lady. You must have lost your track. When I'm around, all you can do